Another Adobe Illustrator quick tip by Fatfly Design. In this video, we are going to take a look at how to create and use clipping masks in Adobe Illustrator. I find this is a very useful technique that I use quite often. So what is a clipping mask? Well, a clipping mask is when we use a shape, maybe a star, to mask out a portion of artwork underneath it. So instead of having this black star on top of this textured background, I want this textured background to only appear within this star, like I've got it right over here. Well, how do we do that? Well, you sort of have to know the rules of clipping masks to begin with. A clipping mask takes two objects, two things at least. So my star is one, and then this texture is actually a bunch of squares, but they're grouped together. That'll work as our second object. Okay. Now we have something that will work as the mask. That's going to be my star, and something being masked by the star, and that's my texture in the background. So my mask must be on top of the stacking order, and they must all be on the same layer. You can't have these spread out over multiple layers or it won't work. So my star is on top of my texture. It's blocking it out right now, and I want this texture to appear only inside of this star. So I have to select everything I want involved in that, the mask and everything I want to mask by it, and go to Object, Clipping Mask, Make. Now you may notice that the keyboard shortcut is Command 7. And now that appears only inside of the star. Now the rest of it has not been deleted. If you go to your Group Select tool and double click, because this is multiple items that were grouped together, you'll notice that the rest of that still exists outside of the mask. So I can actually move it in relationship to the mask. Now if I move it too far, it doesn't fill up that whole star. But I can rearrange objects within there, and I'm doing that with my Group Select tool. Okay, so I've accomplished what I wanted to accomplish here. Once you've turned something into a clipping mask, maybe you want to change your mind and release that clipping mask. Let's talk about that. So I can select it, and that selects the mask and everything being masked by it with my selection tool. Go to Object, Clipping Mask, Release. And everything comes back that was masked by that. Now there's one major difference. Do you remember at the beginning our star was filled with black? Well, now it has no fill and no stroke. And this could be really deceiving, and it's hard to get a hold of it if you need to get a hold of it again. So keep in mind, once you turn something into a clipping mask, the mask loses both its fill and its stroke. And if you ever release it, it looks invisible if it's not selected. So it's still setting here, but it has no fill and no stroke. So in preview mode, we can't really see it. Okay? I'm going to go ahead and turn that black again, just so we can see it. Okay. Now, I'm going to use a letter instead of a shape of a star. So I'm just going to grab my type tool, type out a letter. Maybe make it something bolder here. Okay, that's a nice bold letter T. And I can select both the T that's going to act as the mask and everything I want to mask by it. Object, Clipping Mask, Make. Now my point is this, you don't even have to convert this to outlines. It is still a type object. I could still highlight this and type the letter S if I wanted to. So it's not necessary in this case to create outlines. You may want to eventually, but you don't have to. Okay, let's move on down here, and I want to show you something else. This pattern that I created is just a series of rectangles, okay, with different colors, and I'm going to put something here behind it just so you can see. Okay, so you see how it's transparent in between these rectangles. It's not like those were white rectangles in there, okay? Okay, now, if I use the same principle, I want the star to mask that. I'm going to move the star on top, and in this case, it's not on top of the stacking order, so I'm going to go to Edit, Cut, Edit, paste in front, it'll place it on top of the stacking order in that layer, exactly in the same location. Now I select everything I want to be involved in this clipping mask, object, clipping mask, make. Okay? Which is the results that we wanted. Now, let me show you this again. Notice that it's transparent here. This is not filled with white. Well, what if I wanted this to be a solid color back in here? I may have to approach this a little bit differently. Okay, sort of like I did over here. So I'm going to undo all of this. I'm going to get it back to where they were separate. Good. So I've got my texture, a bunch of rectangles. I have my star that's going to work as a mask. And let's say that I want this to be this color in the background. Okay, so I'm going to move this over here and I'm going to send it to the back. Object, arrange, send to back. Okay, now I want this green background back here, but I want the star to also work as my clipping mask and I need it on top. So I want it to use the green of the star, but I also want to use it as a clipping mask. So all I have to do is copy that, paste it in front again, so I actually have a star, a bunch of stripes, and a green star in the background. And now I'm going to select everything that I want to work together and make it a clipping mask. And now I have that green background instead of that transparent background. So it all depends on what you're wanting that background to be. Quite often I'm using that shape twice. Once as my background color and once as the mask that sets on top. Hopefully that explains clipping masks pretty well to you. They're a tool that I use all of the time when I design in Illustrator, and keep in mind that you can always release them if you need to. But when you release them, that mask loses its fill and stroke, and if you need to see it again, you may want to fill it with a color.
Another Adobe Illustrator quick tip by Fatfly Design.